Welcome back to my channel. This evening I have got 3 haunted doll stories. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin. Story number 1. The Porcelain Bride. When Ellie Matthews inherited her grandmother's Victorian home in a quiet New England town, she didn't expect the old house to be filled with so many antiques. Her grandmother had been eccentric, a holder of delicate trinkets, lace doilies and dolls. So many dolls, with glassy, watching eyes. But the one Ellie couldn't stop thinking about was kept in a glass case in the upstairs hallway. It wore a tattered bridal gown. The porcelain face was cracked like a scar, and a yellowed tag around its wrist read, Isabelle, 1872. That first night Ellie heard something, scratching, soft, deliberate, from inside the glass case. She told herself it was just the wind, or maybe even mice. But the next morning the case was open, the glass pane was resting against the wall, and Isabelle was gone. Ellie searched the entire house. Nothing. Then, the following morning, Isabelle was back, sitting at the end of Ellie's bed. Veil over face, eyes locked on Ellie. She locked the doll in the case again, this time bolted it, wrapped it in duct tape, and even said a prayer. But every night, the doll returned, closer and closer. One night on the nightstand, the next in the bed beside her. Ellie set up cameras. They glitched every night at 2:13 a.m, right when the doll would move. The town historian told her Isabelle had belonged to a woman named Margaret, a bride who was murdered the night before her wedding, strangled in her gown, the doll left beside her. Her fiancé had vanished, and the doll passed hands for generations, until it reached Ellie's grandmother. Desperate, Ellie burned the doll. It didn't catch. She threw it in the river. It came back, waiting on her pillow. Her spirit seeks completion, the historian had said. So Ellie called a paranormal expert. At 2 a.m. they began a binding ritual. The air turned ice cold. The walls groaned. The doll's eyes bled black. The glass case exploded. An invisible force hurled the expert across the room. Crack. His head hit the wall. The doll levitated, her veil fluttering as if in water. Ellie grabbed the sewing scissors and stabbed them into the lace-covered chest. The room fell silent. Days later, Ellie moved out. She buried Isabelle in a locked box beneath a concrete slab in the backyard. She never came back. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, Ellie swears she hears wedding bells ringing from under the garden. Story number 2. Buttons in the walls. When Brian and his husband Marcus bought the old farmhouse in rural Vermont, they thought they were chasing a dream. Fresh air, quiet life, a place to build a future. But the house had other plans. On the second week of renovations, Brian discovered a sealed crawl space hidden behind the wall of the nursery. Inside it, a dusty old chest, broken toys, moth-eaten rags, and one thing that stood out, a handmade rag doll. No mouth, just button eyes, stitched seams, and a heart sewn into its chest with red thread. A note dangled from its wrist. Keep her in the walls, She hears everything. Brian laughed. A weird joke, an art piece maybe. He set the doll on the nursery windowsill and went back to work. That night he woke to whispering, faint like voices behind the walls. He nudged Marcus awake, but the sound vanished. The next morning the doll was gone. Brian found it under the crib, lying face down, still watching, waiting. Did you move it? He asked Marcus. Marcus just shook his head. Nope. Brian packed the doll in a small box and shoved it into the basement. 2 nights later, the whispering came back, louder this time, more voices. When they opened the nursery door, the doll was sitting in the middle of the floor, facing the closet. Brian tried to throw it away, tossed it into the dumpster, but when he walked back inside, it was on the kitchen table, mud-streaked, smiling. That night, the whispering became screaming. Voices in the vents, the floor, the ceiling. The house shook. Lights exploded. Mirrors cracked. The dog refused to go upstairs. Marcus began to sleepwalk. Brian found him in the nursery, sitting in the crib, cradling the doll, whispering, "She's awake now. We let her out." Terrified, Brian tracked down the previous owners. An old woman answered the door. He showed her a photo of the doll. She paled, then whispered, "That belonged to Mary, our daughter. She talked to it more than us, and after she got sick, people started getting hurt." "What happened to Mary?" Brian asked. The woman looked away. "She's still in the walls." Brian went home and tore open the nursery wall. Behind the insulation was a child-sized cavity. Inside, scattered buttons, tiny shoes, and a shriveled fabric heart. He turned. The doll was behind him, button eyes sewn shut. Brian dragged it into the yard, built a fire, poured some salt, chanted anything he could find online. As it burned, a wail echoed through the streets, like a child screaming from inside the earth. After that, the house was quiet. They painted over the nursery and turned it into an office. Life went on, but sometimes Brian finds red buttons in his shoe, under his pillow, once even floating in his coffee. He never tells Marcus, because now he hears her in the walls too. Story number 3. Marionette. When Caleb's mother passed away, she left him everything: the house, the furniture, and her antique collection. He sold most of it off, except for one piece, the marionette. It had always hung in the corner of the bedroom, life-sized, paint peeling from its circus costume, wooden limbs worn smooth, a pale carved face, almost too realistic. Its glass eyes glistened, like they were waiting, and on the back of its neck, a carved nameplate, Lark. Caleb never remembered seeing it move, but his mother used to talk to it. Late that night, when she thought he couldn't hear, "You be good now. No more of your games." He thought it was just a sentimental thing, so he hung Lark in the corner of his apartment like a keepsake. That night, Caleb had a dream. His mother was standing at the foot of his bed, mouth open, eyes wide, pointing to something. behind him. He woke up gasping. Lark was hanging in the corner, but one string was loose. The right arm now dangled lower than the rest. Over the next week, things got strange. Doors unlocked, the shower turned on by itself, and every night he heard tapping, like wooden fingers on the floor. So Caleb set up a camera. He recorded overnight. At exactly 2:47 a.m, Lark moved. His head lifted, turned slowly towards the bed. Then the footage glitched. The strings began to pull on their own, and the marionette walked across the room, arms jerking, feet clacking, a puppet without a puppeteer. Caleb left that night. He brought the footage to a spiritualist, a woman named Madame Drusilla. She watched in silence, and then said quietly, "Your mother didn't own him. She was containing him." Lark was a binding doll, made by Gustav Heim, a puppeteer who believed he could trap souls inside his creations. Lark was a masterpiece, and a curse. They said the spirit inside was once a murdered boy, and over the years he grew vengeful. Gustav was found strangled in his wagon by his own puppet strings. Drusilla told Caleb the only way to contain Lark was to return him to stillness, to bury him under sacred forgotten ground. So Caleb drove out to the ruins of an abandoned church near the woods, where no one ever went. He wrapped Lark in change, salted the crate, hammered it shut. As he lowered it into the ground beneath the altar, the marionette moved. One hand reached out and touched his arm. A voice echoed in Caleb's mind. "Play with me." He dropped the crate, poured more salt, and buried it deep. Back home he burned everything Lark had touched, the strings, the hooks, the stand. But some nights he wakes up with splinters in his skin. He hears footsteps, wooden and sharp, pacing behind his bedroom door. And in his dreams he's not in bed. He's hanging above a stage, strings in his wrists, dancing to music he doesn't know. Thank you for joining me this evening. Sweet dreams.